Hi, and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we did? I am your co-host, Andrew.
And I am your co-host, Michelle. And we're glad you're here today.
So what are we going to talk about today, Mother?
So today we are going to talk about a video that was recommended to me by I was in a professional speaking experience group, and one of the people leading it, shout out to Dr. Rob and Michael Faber, or leading the thing, actually talked about this video, and he was talking about it from a good speech perspective. But also, this is one of those videos or talks, it's a TED Talk, that I find a good reframe for myself. Like, I listen to it every now and again to just sort of check myself to see my perspective and where my mindset is landing. So, yeah. It's a speech by Sean Achor, I think is how you say his name, and it is about happiness.
Excellent. Well, before we jump into the speech, I gave the intention last week. Do you want to start giving an intention for this week?
Sure, I would love to. And again, the intentions tend to go off the videos for me. And I feel like my intention this week is to notice my perspective on whether or not I'm celebrating things that I could be celebrating. I think the short answer of that is I think my intention is to notice when I can celebrate more.
I like that. That's a good intention.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to give a summary of what this video is about?
I can give a quick little summary, and then I would love to hear your perspective of the video first, if that's okay.
Sure.
So one of the things I love about this speech is he uses humor a lot in it. I actually found some of the things he said to be quite funny, which is I enjoy that lightheartedness. And then I also found it fascinating because he was talking about Harvard students and people assuming that there would be a lot of happiness on that campus. And then he was breaking down where we actually find happiness, how we actually know what that is. And he was talking about how, like, we can have happiness. How to me it felt as like there's this temporary happiness, and then we reset a different goal so that we're not happy anymore. So we have to achieve something else to then be happy again. That's like my quick little nugget of how it felt to me when I listened to it. But I've listened to it several times, so my analyzation or summary of it might have shifted and ebbed and flowed over time.
Yeah, so just like in broad strokes, what was this video about?
It was about studies and happiness.
Studies and happiness. What do you mean by studies?
Well, he was talking about studies. He was actually talking about graphs and data and how they pull data and how they pull things out of when they are researching things. And they were researching happiness and what that might look like. And I wish I had my notes in front of me from when I very first listened to the video, because he was talking about, what is it, like 10% of, do you remember this percentage that he broke down? Like, you only know 10% of someone's happiness by knowing them, like knowing their external, like what they say and how they describe their happiness.
No, I believe the 10% statistic was something along the lines of knowing someone's external conditions only predicts 10% of their happiness.
Yes, that's what I was trying to get at, and I couldn't pull it from my brain right now. I went totally blank.
Yeah, so basically, like, if you know that someone is like has a really wealthy job and is married and has 4 kids, and like, you know, if you know all these things about their external life, it's not a very good predictor of how happy they actually feel.
Right. And then I love how at the end he gave tools on ways that you can build your mindset and your perspective to grow that shift into happiness.
Yeah, he was talking about this sort of positive thinking, positive mindset, and like the psychological research into that, which is what I guess this guy did as a living.
Yeah.
How sort of his thesis to me seemed to be that your internal state, how you see the world, has a lot more to do with your happiness and also your productivity, your like measured intelligence, he was even saying, and like so many other like outcomes of how you're doing in life, and how you're feeling, have a lot more to do with your internal states than your external states. Is that all in line with what you got from it?
Yes. And when you asked me what it was about, I was like already in my brain in the pieces of like things that he said that I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Or, oh, that's interesting. Where I just could not find a cohesive way to say this video is about this thing. It's like, it's about happiness. I don't have anything else to say about it. Let's break it down. Mm-hmm. But yes, exactly what you just said. And I thought it was, I find it refreshing. I find myself a little bit skeptical of some of it sometimes, depending on my state, which I find also interesting. It's like there's this resistance within me going, yeah, maybe, but I say that depends, you know? Mm-hmm. Did you get that too a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's, in particular, psychological research, but all research really, is generally studying trends and is not necessarily 100% applicable to everyone. So there's definitely, very good points made in the TED Talk, but it's not necessarily, I don't take it as gospel, which is not his intention from anything that he said either. But by and large, I do think it was a good thing to think about. But actually, I'm actually really curious now what pieces you felt resistance to specifically.
Well, it's funny because it's things that I do in my own self-care, and it's things that I even encourage other people to try, or things I have done in my self-care. I don't always do it. I've shifted into other things that work for me better now. And I think that's I'm like you, I listen to things and then I'm like, I extrapolate what works for me in the now, but I have a hard time kind of taking anything as like the end all be all prescription, so to speak, of what's going to work for the masses. I just think we've talked about this before, right? So complex and unique, and what works for me in 1 month might not work for me at all in the next month. For instance, he was talking about the like writing 3 things you're grateful for every day, or writing, those kind of, or like positive affirmations and that kind of stuff. And it's like, does that stuff work? Sure, it can. And it's better than the alternative. But for me, sometimes, like if my routine is to, if my routine, or if I'm told I have to list 3 things that I'm grateful for every day, and I say this, full disclosure, I say this to people, like just pick 3 things, just start there. But for me, that becomes mundane, and I'm like, whatever. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for that. I do better if I wake up and I'm like, just, am I in a state of gratitude? If not, it's more of a self check-in versus like, I have to do these 3 things to make my mind positive. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that is a perfect example of, that is a perfect marker of the fact that this is all based on his research. And in research, you can't really operationalize checking in with yourself. Like, that's a really hard thing to do. Like, in research, you need a specific procedure that you're telling everyone to do. So you have like a control group and the experimental group, and you have to tell the experimental group to do this procedure. So all of his sort of suggestions were very procedural in that way, because that's what we can actually get data on. So that's what he was able to support.
Right. And to be fair, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, which is totally useful and good for research, that it, until we figure out a way to operationalize and test, checking in with yourself, or those like more, I guess, abstract things. Until we figure out a good way to test that, we shouldn't be making necessarily factual claims about trends in populations and all of that sort of thing, the sort of claims that he was making. But we don't need factual claims and trends in populations to discuss good ideas and experiences and wisdom about how to be happier. Like,
right.
Like,
well,
not. I am a huge supporter of science and I love it. It's not the answer to every question.
Right. Well, and I think for me, what I was going to say is, to be fair, I do think I started with writing 3 things. Well, I know I did. I started with writing things down, or maybe not even. I didn't necessarily always write it down, but for me, it was like I did think of 3 things at the beginning of each day and 3 things at the end of each day, and only after I got that done and to a point where it was like my go-to, only then could I get to the place where I just check in with myself and see if I'm in a state I want to be in. Because I used to live in a world where I was woe is me. I'm not a morning person in general. Like, my nature is that I'm a night owl and not a morning person. But I used to dread getting out of bed. I was just like, ugh, another day, another day. This is awful. And to me, to climb out of that sort of, doomsday feeling in the morning, affirmations or things that I was grateful for did matter and did help. But over time, for me, that got mundane and routine instead of actually being gratitude. And so I shifted how I worked with that and how I navigated it. And that was helpful. So
do you think that that's an example of growth? Like you started there and then grew beyond that?
I potentially, yes. I'll say this. I think everybody ticks differently, and some people do really, really well with the same thing day in and day out and routine and not a lot of variety. And I feel like I need both. I like structure and routine and, schedules on some level, but I also get bored really quickly when it comes to stuff like that. And if I don't get clever and make things interesting or navigate them in new ways, and maybe that is just how I grow, I suppose that could also be true. But I think for me, for my answer to that is yes, that's true for me. I think as I grew, I just found different tools that worked more in alignment with where I was on any given day. And even now, like, some days reading is great for me and other days reading is awful for me. It just depends on my mental state. Right? Like, it just depends. And that's one of my tools in my self-care toolkit. But also, like, if it's a day where my brain is just spinning like crazy, there's 0 chance I'm going to be able to concentrate on a book. I'm going to have to do something different. Probably it's going to require movement for me. So I don't know. It's like, once you know more about how you navigate and how you tick and how you think and what does truly make you happy, then you can be creative and clever in how you choose to find that on any given day in any given moment. But I do understand you got to start somewhere, and I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah, for sure.
How about you?
What about me?
Well, do you know what makes you happy? Would you say in general you have a positive mindset and that you have happiness?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm very lucky in that way, both in terms of my like material surroundings, like just the position I am in life. I'm very lucky to. I think it meshes well with my mindset, and that mindset is. Generally, I see the good in things. I think I also see the costs of things. Like, I think my mind is very much oriented in that way of benefit and cost. And benefit can be a very emotional thing too. It's not just like, oh, here's the it's not as like economical as it sounds when I put it that way. It can very much be emotional benefit and human benefit. But I think I am simultaneously do tend to gravitate towards seeing things in a positive light. I'm a quite optimistic person. And at the same time, I also find myself thinking about the costs of things a lot too. So, and I think those things actually go hand in hand, because a lot of the costs that I think of are the potential other benefits of the other options. So I think it's actually this really interesting thing where like a very intense optimism towards everything can lead to, it can be almost negative in a sense, where if you see other possibilities of things that didn't happen as really good, or as you see the good things that could have come from that and they didn't happen, then that can almost feel a bit I don't know, that can get you down a bit, I guess. I think generally I do try to direct my optimism towards the world as it is and the way things have gone, while still like I feel like I'm in a like I'm going back and forth. Like when I was younger, I focused a lot. I was extremely optimistic about the way things were, and like everything happens for a reason. Basically, the universe can do no wrong. Obviously not to that quite extreme extent, but pretty dang close. And I think I have perhaps overcorrected a bit at times, where I've recognized, oh no, there are bad things, and I have to recognize those and try to, do my part in either accepting them or making them better. Ideally, the latter. And I feel like I'm currently navigating like going back and forth between those two states of mind, of this like almost toxic optimism and this almost like obligation sense of, this almost like sense of obligation to make it better, which is okay in healthy amounts, but there are obviously also unhealthy amounts of that. So I think that's sort of a thing that I'm currently navigating, is, to what extent do I lean into my optimistic tendencies, and to what extent do I hedge that a bit? And does that answer your question?
Yeah, you have me thinking about sort of like, I was taking what you were saying and putting it in through my filter and seeing like, how do I navigate things like that? Or how do I show up with similar things? Or what are my current maybe struggles, or how have I shifted within all of that, right? And like I always say I'm an optimistic realist. Like I'm optimistic, but to a point, because I used to be, and I'm just going to use people as an example. I used to just believe that everyone was good. How could you possibly wish harm on another person? Or how could you possibly, hurt someone else's feelings? Or how could you possibly not want to help people? I don't understand, right? Like I was just in that state of like, I don't understand why anybody would do such a thing, kind of a thing, which is completely a judgment on my part. And sometimes, makes sense. But other times it was just like I was at the expensing myself, right? Like I was giving to the point of complete depletion and harm for me. And so I had like this so I was constantly getting disappointed.
Our conversation this week went a bit longer than usual, so we're going to split this one up into 2 episodes. But before we go, how can our listeners find us, Mom?
They can find us on social media at Michelle Albers, either on Facebook or Instagram, or at JD Wellness on Facebook or JD Studio on Instagram, or they can check out our website at JIDwellness.com, JAIDEE wellness.com. And feel free to contact us. There's a contact us button, email, sending us PMs on social media works too. Whatever you want, however you want to connect would be great. We're so happy you're here. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Bye. Be you every day.
Bye.